Well, welcome to the Unstoppable Freedom Podcast. I'm Jimmy Page. Well, it's no secret that our leaders are working overtime to destabilize our communities. They're demoralizing the police, decriminalizing rioting and looting, and dividing us against each other in any way possible. Crime is on the rise, and all of this makes our communities feel less safe. And there's a dramatic rise in gun ownership, especially among women. Well, our guest today is Dianna Muller, and she is the founder of Women for Gun Rights, a nationwide organization of women committed to safeguarding the Second Amendment. She's a retired 22-year veteran of the Tulsa Police Department and two-time national three-gun champion and a professional shooter. So you got to be careful around this woman. She's very capable. Dianna, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jimmy.
Did I get all that right? I mean, you're a pretty accomplished person.
Yeah, that sounded all great. And then your opening, like, wow, bam, you covered it. You covered a lot.
Well, good, because now we're going to talk a little bit about the solution, and I know that's one of the things that I'm so intrigued with Women for Gun Ownership, because first of all, about 25 years ago, early on in my marriage, my wife and I had a conversation about guns in the home, and she had never grown up with guns in the home. I think they scared her, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, and I get that. And I finally had this conversation when our kids were little, and I just said, hey, listen, if someone were to actually break into our home, and they had firepower, they had capability to really do harm, and I didn't have the ability to physically respond in a way that would stop them and protect the kids, protect you. And what if those people could do unspeakable harm to you and the kids? Is it okay? Is it a good idea for me not to be able to respond with force? And I can tell you, Dianna, that was the moment for my wife where she was like, I finally understand why this is important for us personally. And that began, a 25 or 30-year journey of really protecting our family. Tell us a little bit about, do women fear handguns? Are they generally speaking more inclined to not be too excited about gun ownership?
Well, I think traditional roles, the man was the protector. The men went hunting. The men were the firearms owners. And that's why, this is a big deal with the age, whether it be feminism, whether it be, I didn't get married until late in life. But women are very capable of, and they're realizing that they can be their own first responder, that they don't need the white knight, that they can have their own sword, and they can do for their families and their kids and themselves what traditionally men have done. Now, does that mean I don't want the men to be strong and armed? No. And honestly, I think that it's the ignorance, and it doesn't matter whether it's men or women. It's the ignorance and the lack of education that makes guns scary. I mean, they could feel the same way about a chainsaw, or they could feel the same way about, any kind of tool. A firearm is just a tool, but the antis have done such a good job of demonizing and making it a taboo topic, a taboo subject, that it's really been effective in influencing our communities. That's why we say education, not legislation, is actually the key to safety.
Yes. Yeah. It's so good. Like you touched on a number of things that I want to make sure we dig in on, right? The first thing that you said was, and then I'll tell you the rest of the story with my wife and now my daughter. The first thing you said is women realize that they can be their own first responder. We live in a society now where random crime happens, where people are threatened just for walking on the street, where someone carjacks them, or they're in the Walmart parking lot. I was in a prominent grocery store parking lot in Maryland, just north of Baltimore. Beautiful area, low crime. I would consider it a low crime area. And there was an altercation happening in the parking lot. You just never know. And here's what we know. We love the police. The police are fantastic. They're outmanned. They're outgunned right now. They're demonized. They're struggling too with morale. The chance of them getting there in time to help you is increasingly reduced. The likelihood is small, and so you have to be in a situation where you're capable of defending yourself, don't you?
Absolutely. And, as a 22-year police officer, this is what's so funny about, my organization, the Women for Gun Rights versus, let's say, Moms Demand Action. I feel like that I have some credibility when it comes to experience with violence, experience with
Yes.
firearms, and they don't. And they have the big money behind them. They will influence people against their God-given right to protect themselves with the best tool available.
Yes.
So that's why it's important for me to come on your show and talk to your audience. That's why it's important for our state directors to go out to their local, to just grow that base. So I would encourage anybody. Our website's womenforgunrights.org, and join us. It doesn't cost anything to join, and it really just plugs you into the state level of advocacy. It's not a whole lot. We don't do firearms instruction. We do more of the advocacy. We champion those organizations like A Girl and a Gun or the Well Armed Woman that do, shoot like a girl. If you're ever at Cabela's, look for that big trailer, Shoot Like a Girl. If you've never shot, that's a fantastic place to. They've got this massive trailer that they haul around and go to Cabela's, and you can just walk in and do simulated firing and learn, do the education part. So there are those great women's focused organizations. But Women for Gun Rights is more of how do we influence our friends, our families, and our neighbors, our legislators on why we as women want to protect the Second Amendment.
Yeah, it's so good. And this is kind of what I would consider air support. Like it's big picture. It's making sure that at the top we don't make stupid law. Well, which we have thousands of dumb laws about this and a lot of misconceptions. I'll finish the story about my wife and now my daughter. So here we go. Fast forward 25 years or so, and women feel less safe. And I want you to speak to this a little bit because as a former law enforcement officer, and a woman and a mom, you understand this, right? For me, uh, a few years ago, my wife said, "Hey, listen, I think it's going to be important that I can protect myself." And so we began this journey of gun selection and getting that, and then her taking courses and getting trained in it, and then getting her concealed carry permit here in Colorado, which thankfully we still can get.
Mm.
So I'm proud of her. She still doesn't carry yet because she wants to become more proficient with the firearm. First time she ever went to the range and heard a gun fire, even with the ear protection, heard a
Mhm.
gunfire, heard additional gunfire in the shooting range. It was an unnerving situation for her. It is for everybody, if we're honest. Tell us a little bit. Number one is that something that most women need to overcome, that kind of that initial startling moments, and why is it so important that women do get familiar with handguns and how to use them properly?
Well, I think that's a natural response. I mean, honestly, you're having a little explosion going off in your hand.
Right.
Once you learn how to, physically and mentally control that, it's very empowering.
Yes.
Probably the same thing with your wife. Once she got over that little hurdle of the loudness and okay, well, it doesn't recoil so much. Ladies, there are guns that recoil, and you do not want to start with those.
Yes.
But make sure you start with the right firearm and give them the right fundamentals, and then they can. It's not a big deal. And I have woman after woman. I don't instruct a lot, but I've instructed enough. I was an instructor for the firearms, for the police department, but I'm mostly focused on competition. So when I do instruct, I mean, every time there's a woman that is scared, that has never fired a round before, they come away a different person. I really haven't ever came across somebody that was like, no, I hate it even more.
Right.
There have been some that have literally taken me by the shoulders and said, I am a changed person.
Yes.
And one of our Florida State Director, Shirley Wattrell, she was one of those people.
Mm.
She didn't have a firearm and she wasn't against it. She just didn't part of her normal. And she had an ex kidnap her for 15 hours and torture her. And after that, she did the, restraining order. She did the move to a gated community, and it didn't stop him. So that's when she turned to the firearm, and she is now a different person. She wrote a book called Heels to Holster, and it's just, those kind of stories are very liberating. Our main state director, Andy Reardon, she just went to the state capitol for their opening day of legislature, and one of the people that were at the Lewiston, one of the ladies at the Lewiston shooting that survived, she had her and her daughter there in support of the Second Amendment.
Wow.
So it's really important for all of us to get versed in why we support the Second Amendment.
Yes.
As a Christian, I can't speak to you as a Christian if I don't spend time with reading the word, and it's like being a disciple of Christ. If you're not a disciple of the Second Amendment, you don't know how to speak about it. If you're not a disciple of America, you don't know how to speak about America. You don't know how to take on these communists who don't know that they're communists, to speak about our liberties and what our Constitution actually means. So I encourage your audience to dive into all of those and really become a student of your life, of how you believe. How do you articulate that to somebody? Because if you're not able to do that, then you're really not doing anything for the good of the country, good of the Second Amendment.
It's so good. I mean, what an important point, right? When I started really investigating the Second Amendment, because there's so much disinformation, misinformation, outright lies, propaganda, political nonsense. It honestly, almost nothing that is said in the political square has anything to do with history or reality. It is that
Mm-hmm.
bad. So when you start reading that, our founders believed that the right to the Second Amendment it was the first natural right. In other words, no other right mattered if you didn't have the right to protect yourself from bodily harm. And so they're from in the earliest writings. In fact, if you look at all of their writings, they talk about this need for and this right that's given by God, not government. So this right
Mm-hmm.
is given by God that every one of us, of course, has agency to protect ourselves. No one, it's almost absurd to suggest that someone should be a sitting duck, that they don't have the authority to protect themselves. So if someone's coming at them in a violent way with a firearm, or if they're in fear for their life, they should be able to defend themselves. The government's job is not to give the right. The government's job is to protect the right. How do you counter the disinformation that gun control groups, the communists that you speak of, that want to eliminate guns, how do you counter that disinformation campaign?
Well, you become a student. And to help people, we actually have on our landing page, womenforgunrights.org, there is a free download.
Mm.
And basically, it has all of the, like the usual suspects, red flag laws, universal background checks. Why do I not want a universal background check? If you can't answer that, you need to get this download, and you need to rehearse this and study this. That is the universal background checks are the last hurdle that the government needs to clear in order to confiscate guns down the way. You can't be short-sighted in that. Red flag laws. Red flag laws are redundant and ineffective and dangerous. There is already vehicles in place across the state for law enforcement to take in dangerous and people that are a threat to themselves or others. There's absolutely zero reason for a red flag law. If you think this person is dangerous, get them committed. But taking away one means of danger is just ludicrous. It's not helping anybody. It's not helping the people in danger. It's not helping the person that's having a crisis.
Amazing.
So that's how we do it, is that we educate ourselves, and that we become real advocates for the Second Amendment in our country.
Yeah. What I love about you touched on some issues that are real hot button issues here in Colorado, because
Mm-hmm.
we've got a lot of communists in government. They don't like to hear that, but wow, this state is so very similar to the communist state of California.
Yep.
Unfortunately, you've got millions and millions of citizens in California that are under this communist rule, that are fighting back. They're fighting back for educational freedom. They're fighting back for Second Amendment. and boy, it's a brawl there. But unfortunately, we've imported that philosophy, this communistic philosophy, and they're going after guns everywhere. Red flag laws. You mentioned some. This is so important, right? As someone who cares about self-defense, defending my family, defending my loved ones, defending my community, when they talk about red flag laws, what they're actually saying is we want to turn one citizen against another citizen. Now, our founding fathers talked about this. They said we should have incredible trust among each other and distrust with the government. Why have we lost that? Why do we think that a red flag law is acceptable?
Well, I think that whomever is behind this whole move towards socialism and disguising communism disguised as socialism. I mean, it was a brilliant plan with the schools. They've infiltrated our schools. They've been teaching our kids,
Yes.
and they have the masses. They have the media. So how did it happen? I don't know, but I think they were playing the long game, and they have been reaping and sowing and sowing, and now they're reaping the rewards of their long-term game and the long-term goal. And China, they are definitely long-term goal people. So, what do we do about it is the question. I mean, really, you have to take what you have to, it has to happen at a local level. Everybody has to get engaged. Nobody wants to be in politics, but politics is going to be on you if you don't want to be on politics. And that's exactly how we let our schools go. That's exactly how we let our police departments go, and so forth. So if you do care and you do want to make a difference, I encourage you to run for school board, run for state office, run for a city council, get the reins back, and then withstand the storm of the haters that are going to, call you every name in the book. Everybody has to be strong with the backlash that's coming, because these are like 2-year-old children. They've been throwing tantrums for how many years now, and everybody keeps bowing a knee to them. So, you're going to have to withstand the tantrum that comes with standing up for what's righteous. But
Yeah. It's so good. I was thinking too, it's funny because you're taking some of these issues, which to reasonable people don't even seem like that big of a deal. Like you talked about universal background checks. Every single time I've purchased a gun, I've had a background check. So we are now conditioned to think, of course, you're going to have a background check. I don't want criminals or violent criminals, worse yet, to get guns.
right.
But universal background checks are different because it creates a national registry. And then, of course, we've seen this happen in other countries where they've gone and confiscated guns. That's why we're opposed to it.
Right.
It's amazing to me, too. I know that women are the fastest growing segment for new gun ownership.
Right.
Explain that to me. Why is that the case? It's got to be part of what you're doing as well, even though you're advocating at the highest levels.
I think it goes back to what the feminists started. Like, when did that little feminist movement start? Trying to be more independent. Women are becoming more independent. We are postponing getting married. We're postponing having families. And with that, if you're intellectually honest, then you can say that I can be my own first responder. So it's really just a matter of, those people can't hear a message from somebody that looks different or sounds different from them, and they are absolutists. They can't. If they were to be intellectually honest, they have to go down that road too. If you think that choice matters, then choice should matter to your defense as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's great. And it's funny because I brought my daughter up. Her brothers. I've got three sons and a daughter. They've all been around firearms. They are all very, very good at handling firearms, specifically
Mhm.
about making them safe, handling them in a proper fashion, and then being able to use them with proficiency. My daughter's the same way, and she's always had that interest in it. I think partly because I want to empower her. As a dad,
Mhm.
I don't want her again to be vulnerable, to be a sitting duck out there. And I know that people mean her harm. We can just look statistically about young females and about crime with them. And I want her to feel empowered. That whole process has just been great. And I think what I love about what you're doing is you're lobbying, if you will, you're making the case at the national level and then you've got state coordinators. Tell us a little bit about that structure. Tell us a little bit about why these state coordinators are important and what they do.
Well, when we first started, it was I didn't want to start another organization. I just wanted to do something. So I knew I didn't have standing anywhere but Oklahoma where I was at the time. So I had to invite people from other states to be able to visit the legislators that were in their state. And then you see the need, you see the forces at work to disarm America. You see that Mom's Demand, Everytown, Brady, you see how well orchestrated they are, and how they're using the female voice to call for more demand for more gun control. Then these policies are failed, but I don't think that these women. I would love to have an audience with Moms Demand Action, their whole membership, because I really think that if they heard a different message from someone that looks like them,
Right.
that they would understand then, kind of like your wife.
Yeah.
But right now they're being fed, they're plugged into the matrix of what big government and communists want them to know is to disarm them. So I think they're being used as pawns, and we can make a change. We as women for gun rights is so important, because it's going to take other women to counter that message and to influence our other women in our circles, that this is a failed policy, and it's not going to make me any safer.
Yeah, it's so good. And I know that you're very active in Washington D.C., perhaps the most I shouldn't say it, perhaps the most corrupt location in the world at this point. My gosh, we're rivaling our communist enemies for corruption
For sure.
and compromise. You are meeting with representatives. Uh, do we have advocates? I mean, legitimate advocates among our representatives in Washington, D.C.?
I believe we do. We have a handful of very constitutionally sound people. And actually, I'll give a shout out to Marjorie Taylor Greene, because she came to DC with us, with Women for Gun Rights, before she ever ran for Congress.
Wow.
We've got another gal. I talk about taking back the reins. We've got another, our Kansas State Director, Rebecca Schmoe. She became a state legislator, so now she's had to relinquish her title for that. But putting people in place, and you asked about the state, why it's important at the state level, is because at the federal level, you're not going to influence your friends, your family, and that's really where your influence starts. You're Just start with your community
Yes.
and then grow.
Mm.
We go to Washington D.C. once a year. I think it's very important, but the actual work, the real work, and the real influence, it needs to take place at a state and local level.
So good. And I do think it's people like you, it's people like my wife who no
Hmm.
no one would think is a gun owner. I mean, no one. She's petite, 5'2", kind as can be, but tough as nails. And in the end, wants to be able to protect herself and protect her family. And I love
Right.
that about her. And I think that when you talk about vulnerabilities, when you talk about an increase in crime, when you talk about the attempts to take this right away from people, I think most people would agree I should always have the right and capacity to protect myself and my family and my property. Is that a message that resonates with most Americans?
Absolutely. And you just need the right vehicle to let people hear that. And I think that's why Women for Gun Rights is so important,
Yeah.
because they need to hear a woman say that for years they have had the woman, I've heard story after story saying, my wife won't let me have a gun in the house. And I'm like, whoa. There's a lot to unpackage there. But
Yeah, there
if
is.
you get the women on board, then you get the whole family. I mean, that's a saying that's been around forever. If you just get dad, you just get dad. If you get mom, you get the whole family. And it really is. I mean, I love the shooting sports. The shooting sports is a family affair. Anybody, down to, there's probably 10-year-olds that are shooting three gun. So it's just amazing that it's a lot better for the family than going to a soccer game and everybody sitting there bored out of their mind. Everybody can participate. You're actually teaching them skills that they can use to defend themselves, to feed themselves, all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of good things that goes on with the shooting sports. So shout out to National Shooting Sports Foundation, and they do a fantastic job of lobbying for the firearms industry.
Mm. Well, let's talk a little bit about what you would tell men who are married to a woman who may be hesitant to fire a firearm or own one, or potentially at some point get trained and start to conceal it. What would you tell a man, a husband, in that conversation who wants his wife to be safe? How do you bridge that conversation? What would he tell her? What are some ways to have a respectful conversation that moves in that direction?
I would tell him absolutely direct her to Women for Gun Rights. We have a little YouTube channel that we have testimony, but B, we also have testimony. And when I say testimony, I mean in front of the House Judiciary, Senate Judiciary, stuff like that. But we also have testimonies, personal testimonies, and like our one of our board members, Robin Sandoval, she is running A Girl and a Gun. She used to be avid anti-gun, hated guns, was one of those women who wouldn't let her husband have a gun. And she watched Katrina, and Katrina was, she was like, what do I have to do to not give my kids to a stranger?
Yeah,
And her husband was like, well, she's like, I'm just going to hunker down. I'm going to buy some tuna fish and some peanut butter, and we're just going to stay together. And he's like, her husband was like, well, what happens when somebody with a gun comes in and takes our tuna fish and our peanut butter? And then the light bulb went off.
right.
So that began her journey to now running the largest women's organization, training organization going. We have lots of stories like that. That's where the men need to direct their women to Women for Gun Rights. Go to our YouTube channel, watch some of the stories of real live women that have either been denied the chance to protect themselves and bad things have happened, or that have successfully defended themselves with firearms. So I think that's the easiest way to convince somebody that this is an asset, not a liability.
Yeah, I love that. It almost takes the pressure off the guy a little bit,
Right.
and it takes some of the conflict that you might experience. It's a very emotional conversation a lot of times when you first bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's brilliant. We'll send them to your website because then they can see, they can hear from other women who had the same concerns that they did, who had, who may have been hesitant, but who are
Mm-hmm.
thankful that they've gone down that road.
Absolutely.
How important is training? Obviously, we're going to point people to your website, and as you said, you're an advocacy group, and I want people who are behind this movement to connect so that we can grow the numbers, so that we can advocate at the state and local level as well. How important is it when women are considering buying their first firearm? That training. Why is training so important?
Oh man, there's actually a two-pronged thing with training, is that knowing how to manipulate a firearm, make it work, make it and be safe with it is one thing completely. The other one is the mentality that goes along with situational awareness and how you avoid conflict, how you deploy it. When am I going to actually deploy my firearm? I mean, there's a lot to unpackage. So I highly encourage people to find someone that they trust, that's reliable,
Mm,
and a legitimate firearms instructor, to learn from.
yeah,
I can't stress how important it is. Now, on the flip side, do I want to mandate that? Hell no.
right,
That is not the place for the government to tell you that you have to meet a threshold
right,
to do your Second Amendment.
right.
If you're going to do it with the Second Amendment, you should do it with the First Amendment, and you're going to have to go through a class and get a license
Yes,
to be able to talk on the internet.
yeah,
So that's not what our First and Second Amendments were all about. It is about it's about the government not infringing upon those rights. So it is important, but it should not be mandated.
it's the same thing as creating a threshold for whether or not you can vote. I mean, all of these same things apply, and it's the same thing with protecting yourself. The government cannot create a threshold where you are legally able to defend yourself. Um, I love this, and I'm really excited about what you're doing, and I'm super grateful for the information that you get. Any other tips or advice that you would give to the women that are listening and their husbands potentially, or just brothers and of their sisters? What would you tell them as far as why it's so important to defend their Second Amendment right?
I believe that the Second Amendment is kind of the capstone of the entire Constitution. Uh, if you can't protect yourself, and you can't protect yourself from the government,
Yeah, yeah,
and you can't keep the government in check, then none of the other ones matter.
yeah,
You give this one up, and the rest of them at their whim.
yeah,
So I definitely, again, just keep going back to our website and the assets that are on there, the talking points page.
yeah.
Just dive in there, and then let us know, like, if you like, okay, red flag laws, I don't understand this. What, I'm still having a problem doing that. I would love to talk to people. We have a Instagram page, we have a Facebook page. We would love to communicate with people and have those conversations. So just jump in and start talking. Let's talk about it.
It's so good. I wanted to go back to what you said about training, why it's important. It shouldn't be mandated, but it's so important. My wife has not begun to conceal carry yet because of two things, and you said it. Number one is how to handle the gun. That's one thing, right? And then it's how do you handle that gun under duress in a stressful situation. And then the third thing is having that mindset, that awareness, that situational awareness. It took me 6 months of carrying every day before I chambered the round. So if you know anything about guns, you know what that means. I had not chambered the round because I was nervous about holstering that gun in my appendix. And then what you finally realize is no, no, there is a safe way to handle this gun. There is a safe
Mhm.
way to holster it. And then you get comfortable with it. You have the mindset, and then you train to be able to protect yourself.
That's fantastic. That's a great testimony.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Diana. I'm telling you what, I'm so excited about what you're doing. So thankful for the organization and thankful for the activity that you have, even in my home state now of Colorado. Grateful for you. We're going to list all the ways to get a hold of you in the show notes, and we're going to point a lot of people to your organization. Thanks so much.
Well, I appreciate it, and we would love to have any kind of financial support. But let me give a shout out to one of our partners
Hmm.
is Patriot Mobile. So you know how we give money to people who work against us. Well, Patriot Mobile is a cell phone provider that has that basically when people sign up using 2A Patriot. 2A Patriots, one word, they give us a portion of the bill for the lifetime.
Oh, wow.
So, this is a fantastic way to support, support a company that is not going to work against your constitutional right, and then support the organization. So I wanted to let everybody know about that, Patriot Mobile.
It's fantastic, and that's a topic for a whole nother show, and we've covered that actually about putting your money where your values are, not giving your money to your enemies so that they can use it
Mhm.
against you. Boy, I'll tell you what, that is brilliant. We will make sure that makes its way into the notes as well. Diana, you're the best. Wishing you the best.
Thanks for the opportunity. Good talking to you.
You bet.